Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Anderson Ranch and our summer faculty lecture series. My name is William Lanzillo, and I am the sculpture studio coordinator. Before we begin, if you could take a moment to silence your cell phones. And I also want to start by recognizing that the Anderson Ranch campus resides on the historic tribal lands of the Ute people who have called this home for over 800 years. In honor of this legacy, we focus on building an inclusive community here, maintaining this as a place for inspiration and creativity in the center of the Rocky Mountains. Tonight's program will consist of 2 faculty lectures followed by a Q&A. First, I would like to introduce Kristy Deetz. Kristy Deetz has an extensive exhibition record, including national and international venues. She received SECAC's 2016 Award for Excellence in Teaching and a 2015 Silver Award from Graphist Design Annual in New York. Kristy was recently Erasmus Visiting Lecturer at the University of Kassel, Germany, and Artist in Residence at Burren College of Art in Ireland. Please help me in welcome Kristy Deetz.
There we go. Hello, and thank you all for coming. It's great to be back at the ranch. So thrilled to be here. I appreciate the invitation. I'll get started. If you want to look up anything from my lecture, you can go to my website. It has more information and artist statements and that sort of thing. I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory to the things I'm doing now. I have a long time investigation interest in drapery and actually looking at a lot of Renaissance painting for the development for that language and how it developed. I really like the drapery image because it reveals and conceals things. It's very fluid conceptually. It creates a presence. It could be a stand-in for the figure. It denotes a boundary, a liminality. These pieces are done on wooden panels, and I'm always thinking as a painter of painting as an object and then what's framing the painting. So these wooden panels I would shape in different manners, not radically, but this one's sloping back to the wall or a kind of frame within a frame. And the medium is encaustic and oil paint. I would sand down to the substrate or the plywood, burn the plywood, reveal different layers, and plywood will accept, after you paint a bunch of stuff on top of it, it will accept a layer of wax that again reveals the substrate or the pattern of the wood. Mocking Desire, I was thinking of Fra Angelico's Mocking of Christ, but refashioning it. I think these you might call, in brief, a feminist revision of European canonical painting. There's a presence, a figurative presence, but it's not gender specific. So if you take that idea and throw a trajectory of an alternative historical development, what might that mean? It's a detail on the right. I often think of things that are synesthetic, combining the senses, sound, texture, smell, visual things. And this was the last of this series. I'm just showing you a few short ones here, a few examples. Stillness unfolding. I was thinking, what am I really after in this series? And I think it was realizing that coming to a work of art, and that could be a very broadly accepted term. What is a work of art? Perhaps let's just take an example in a museum. When you're looking at that work of art, it somehow sucks you into it, into the world of the visual text, and everything zips away from you, and you're in a moment of quietness, really, And I think that stillness unfolding is such an important idea. So this is the fabric that I used in all the other paintings. I would continually fold and posture them in different positions to mimic figurative references. But here all that history of my history as a painter that alludes to art history is in this one single piece. So the fabric in all of these is done from observation with carefully lit arrangements, and then down to very tiny brushes. So from there, I was trying to think of that stillness, and where could I go with it? What is representational art? What is abstract art? So these I was thinking of painting and all kinds of things, the relativity of it, and acknowledging that gray area, or how things can be pushed one way or the other. If you know Joseph Alber's color problems, the zips that are put on different backgrounds, these are done with illusionistic painting techniques. So some of the substrate, the wood grain, is real, some is an illusion. I think this is a mirror image of the two in the zip, and again, taking that same fabric that had multiple histories. So they play with minimalism, they play with the frame, they play with illusion. And here I'm sort of pointing that out, veil, frame, void. So the center image is a frame, and it frames itself, or the wall that it's hung on. The panel on the left frames the substrate that's real, and the panel on the right frames the substrate that's an illusion. So these are details. This ended the series. So my husband, my creative and life partner, he's always involved in what I do. It's always a conversation. He's a scholar and creative writer of medieval and Renaissance literature. And I have to say, he makes everything I do better. But we took all that fabric, we washed it, and then we had a sleep with it one night, and we created a whole set of new wrinkles. And so that's the end of this series, but it's the beginning of something else. From there, I wanted to play with it again in a slightly different way, and I took the references of the Renaissance paintings, and I started to fold all of that structure, the compositional structure, in a piece of cloth. Would hang that on the wall, and again, paint from it representationally, but embed certain things from the imagery of the painting that might come out or might go back down in. And these are on silk scarf, and I like the idea that these are really kitschy, kind of like those paintings that you can buy on a silk scarf from a museum. But then they're also sort of a proto-cubism, perhaps. So again, playing with style representation. So, I have to get kind of clever with it. I just can't stop and let it alone. So or at least it's keeping me entertained. Maybe that's a better way of looking at it. So there's acrylic paint, the illusion painted over top of a wrinkled surface. And then the last one is a paint skin. So it has no substrate. It's sort of liberating the whole idea into just paint. And the last one goes from into Baroque pictorial style. And just so you know how I developed those paintings from observation, here's a little, I think I need elevator music or something like that. Actually, I did this because I always wondered, do I practice what I preach to my students about going from general to specific? So I made this little video, and I thought, yeah, for the most part, I do that. Not that you always have to do that, but it's good to learn that way of painting. So it's getting closer and closer to the painting there. These are acrylic versus the oil, and then the previous encaustic and oil. But these led me to these paintings, which were great fun to do. And these they allude to a lot of different paintings from all kinds of art and culture, and two figures started to come out of that. One was based on our buff tabby Bingley, the cat, and then the other is the rabbit, who's long been in my work in various forms. First it was Herberta, the man, god, woman, creature, child thing, and then it was the planetary intercessor and some other stuff in there, and now it's Rabbit and Kitty Boy. So they have different adventures. So anyone recognize the sky in this painting? Yeah, Georgia O'Keeffe. So they escaped the postmodern radar. Aren't they lucky? This was the first painting of this series. I went on something called the Piero della Francesca Trail, which was on my bucket list. And so we went, and I just love his paintings for a number of reasons. But I didn't know what to do with this little image of a rabbit, which I sort of transformed through various means. And then finally, Piero told me, you need to do this. So that began all of this series, which I called Through the Veil, which is kind of an allusion to Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass. This is Ugrasura, the snake demon that's wrapping itself around the painting. But that little Easter rabbit looks kind of fierce. I don't know if I'd want to tangle with him or her. So painting is a game, and how you engage with it really lets you step back and have lots of fun. So here's a chess game, and there's a Duchamp painting backwards in the checkerboards, and there's the rabbit determinately painting an Easter egg while he's being sucked up into the game. And it's a lot like brains and string theory and black holes. So here's targeting Toyman's rabbit. I could start talking a lot about why I find these artists interesting. I don't really have the time. We've got to get Mike up here. Yay, Mike. But Toyman's painting is a painting of a rabbit through a television screen, which is what you're seeing. And that's a superstring diagram. Assisted living. Where's Kitty Boy? So you'll see a lot of rabbits with carrot legs, and I'm thinking of that as an image of desire. We're frantically trying to go somewhere. Where is that thing? Well, here's Rabbit looking for Kitty Boy, his best friend, and Kitty Boy's just chilled out as the Zen sage on the ledge there, and the painting's ready to be unfolded off the stretcher bars. Uh-oh, time is going. So you see the Chinese landscape painting. Here's Hank's rebirth dilemma. My father who passed, I was thinking of what are all the things that he could be reborn as? And that's what you're seeing around. I began stitching in this work, and that led me to these, Easter Falling, and these are all the holidays. This is entitled Holidays Unfolding, and it's actually taking the still life genre, but not making it still. Nature mort is still life, but these are nature vivant. They're really, all over the place. And that they're also calling up the nostalgia of the holidays and how things aren't always what they seem. And for my students, these combine image transfers, embroidery, and then painting from observation. The background is the very first paintings I showed you. I created a pattern that I had produced as a image printed on silk that I used as the substrate. Some details. Valentine's Day exploding. Thanksgiving's loading. And these really became what I would say, they have an Orwellian narrative and delivered through a kind of nostalgic beauty. So I think of them as kind of seducing through that, like, oh, isn't that pretty, but it's kind of weird. And then the other thing you might think, well, what's happening there? Why are these leprechaun rabbits all going off the cliff together? Who's behind the drapery? What else happening? Well, this looks vaguely familiar. Who is that blowing their trumpet? Independence Day cracking. Kind of riffing off of the George Washington, the famous George Washington painting of he's crossing the Delaware, only here everyone's independence is compromised. And Memorial Day missing. So let's get at some kind of hard-hitting social things. And the center is the kind of barbed wires created with automatic assault weapons. And Flag Day transforming, sort of the always pressing even more now of issues of the environment. Instead of a nationalist flag, it's a transforming flag of nature, but a choice there. And again, I'm not showing you all of them, but this is the last one in the series, Friends Day hiding, which kind of, to me, summed up the COVID experience. So we're on the stage of life, and we might get pulled off any minute, and all we see are these eyes, and there's Rabbit and Kitty Boy looking kind of beat up, but they're still singing a song. There's some other stuff in there. My husband, we collaborate, and we've done 2 books, Holidays Unfolding and The Singular Adventures of Rabbit and Kitty Boy. Our process is ekphrasis, which is reverse illustration. Simply put, I do all the paintings, and I probably have the easiest job, actually. Then he does all the writing. He just looks at what is happening in the paintings. We have lots of conversations, and then he makes up kind of a narrative that connects. These are available on Amazon if you'd like them. I've also brought some with me if you're interested in buying them for a little less money. And Rabbit and Kitty Boy have a theme song. I didn't put it on today. I have another avenue of work, and these I do periodically. In brief, they're about the body, nature, and text, and really our fragile connection to each other and nature. So here's nested narrative, and they pun on the form of an open book. That gives you a key. And then they also mimic textures and things you see in nature, and they'll often hold something from nature. So again, I'm going back to encaustic painting on working with these. Frame narratives is the idea of a story within a story within a story. But those transformed into these more recent pieces, and I'll go through this pretty quickly. This is the very recent stuff. And often I'll go through periods where I either sort of destroy a language, and I actually physically destroy objects of that, but they exist in some other kind of realm. I don't even know if I would call them show-worthy, and I don't really care. I think it's more about using that process to get somewhere. And so these are made from trash I'll find on walks with my husband, and then natural materials, also often from site, and then encaustic to mimic different things in nature. And they're pretty funny. As you probably have figured out, I have a dark sense of humor. So I think of these as almost creatures that could have arisen out of some kind of post-apocalyptic thing where nature and technology combined. But what I started to do was put these objects back in the landscape and photograph them and then create paintings from them. So what I like about this is, who's seeing this scene? Is it another creature seeing this scene? Are people still around? Are they seeing this scene? What's happening in this scene? What has evolved? Is it good? Is it bad? Questions. And I'm coming to the end here. I love Gorilla Glue. And I'm working on another larger one like this in my studio right now. So this is progenitors. It was using the creature you just saw before it. And then I take the photographs and I manipulate them and change color and do some other things. And these are details, and I'll be at the end. And that's it. And I'm so pleased to be on this panel session with Mike Lyon. Wow, what a guy. It's incredible. Such a pleasure. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristy, for sharing. That was great. Our next speaker is Mike Lyon. Mike Lyon is a pioneering figure in the field of post-digital printmaking. He programs and adapts computer-controlled machinery to create prints and paintings in his Kansas City studio. Mike's work is in numerous museums and other public collections. Please help me in welcome Mike Lyon.
Wow, it's even turned on. That's cool. Gee, I don't know about following Kristy. I've been worrying about this and thinking. And I thought you would tell some of the stories about these characters we saw, which if you go to her website, you'll see that she's a writer as well. And there are these trippy kind of hallucinogenic stories that are very feeling and nice. And I was thinking that this would be a good follow-up because, okay, we saw like artists, and now you're going to see like work by a guy who's just totally a process junkie and into making stuff and lots of different things. And lots of times I'm more interested in how to make something than I am in the something itself, and these objects just kind of drop off out of your life and practice. So I wanted to say that, very important to me in addition to making stuff is, my family, my wife and I have been married 31 years, and she will yell, which I hope she will if I make mistakes. And we have 6 grandchildren and 5 children between us, and I practice karate. Linda and I share a stand in the second violin section of the Kansas City Civic Orchestra for how many years? 22 years. And since around 1996, I've gotten into collecting mostly antique Japanese woodblock prints and became super interested in printing Japanese technique prints as well. So, also I should say, while I'm just burning up my short time, that I made this presentation with 270 slides initially, and I was going through it, and it was taking like an hour and 20 minutes or so to describe myself. And so I had lots of like, oh, here I am as a little boy, and this is the kind of art I made in grade school. And sorry, I should go back. So I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a degree in architecture and fine arts, which was really sculpture, in 1973, and then took a BFA in painting at the Kansas City Art Institute. I was a student of Rackstraw Downs and Neil Welliver and Fred Osborne, a sculptor who really influenced my sculptural work at Penn. And at the Art Institute, I became a student of mostly of Wilbur Newald, who was a fan of Paul Cézanne, and he was like a guru of painting visually. There is no such thing as painting. You just put what you see onto a very ascetic guy who remained friends until he and his wife died last year, more or less. Thanks, Len. These are paintings from that last year at the Art Institute and a drawing. When I got out of the Art Institute, I tried to make a living. I ran around with paintings, drawings, and prints. I've made a lot of etchings and to all the galleries in Reach in Kansas City. And basically, I would say the reply was, hey, as a gallery owner, I have to make a living too. So come back in 10 or 20 years when you're famous and we'll look at it. So not being able to make a living just making art like so many of us, I went into business. I started a computer company because of my, vast education in fine art. And we produced circuit boards. Well, this was the mid-'70s, so it was like, nobody knew any better. And I made digital circuit design and made like big machines like this one was for Tupperware. Tupperware had a bunch of installations of an invention of mine and my team and some other people. This is a split case order filling system. It just puts stuff like jumping salmon into totes as they move down this long line in the middle of the screen under like a PC controls all this and dumps 60,000 items an hour into moving totes to fill orders on the party plan. And I was in business, that business and my family's cattle hide processing business, which was started in 1870 for about 15 years. I really did not like business, but as Freddie said the other night, I'm pretty good at it. So by 1991 or so, I felt I'd made enough money so that I could make art full-time without worrying about that, I might not be able to sell anything I made or make a living, but I had enough income. So I've done other stuff besides. Most of my work is flat, paintings, drawings, woodblock prints like that. But I also have made a lot of furniture, these big four-poster bed, clavichord for my wife. That's a very sweet instrument. Made 50-some stringed instruments over the last 4 or 5 years, ending a couple of years ago when I got back into woodblock printing, ukuleles, guitars. You can see my studio lighting like that, like those acrylic bent leaf lights with LEDs, all handmade lighting and wiring and everything all. And so this is 1994. This is a woodblock print, a movable type woodblock print. I machined a gazillion acrylic bars, long bars. I didn't have a router. I didn't really know what a router was. I just put a router bit in a drill press and cranked it down and shoved these acrylic bars through a jig to machine each face a different amount so that I could print nothing, or I could print 25% or 50% or 75% or 100%. And then using some software I wrote, I'd become a pretty good programmer in my computer business over the years. And I wrote a program to read into digital image files and see how light or dark they were and put that into an Excel spreadsheet, print it out kind of at scale. So this one's maybe 28 inches square, and from like 1,600 blocks laid according to the numbers on the Excel spreadsheet under this elevator light diffuser grid you can see behind to make this portrait of my sister out of little flags. I made a bunch of stuff like that. This 4-color lithograph out of a font that I created of my face in different amounts of lights and darkness. So it's, you can see it says 6,401 small self-portraits. The litho's it's on big paper, but the image is like 6 inches square out of a bunch of little self-portraits. My kids and my wife made me take out 18 slides here of similar images. And around the mid-1996 or so, I started making these tile patterns and like thinking about, not really about quilting, although the books, they're not really books, they're like staple-stitched books of hundreds and hundreds of symmetrical tile patterns where the tiles are every possible rotation, say, of a grid of a 4x4 grid of tiles that could be put in the grid in any of 4 directions, like those animated, and programming like cool animations of the work so I could see once a second. If we had 4 minutes to spare, you could see all of the possible tiles made by that one tile and some of the patterns that I liked. I used those patterns like in making prints. This is another typeface of that tile pattern. You can kind of see one of the tile patterns up. It's the same tile pattern all over, but the but how much black or white is in the tile has changed, and then the layers are loaded up one on top of the other and kind of comes out color. So 1996 was an important year, both because of making all these tile books, which I made through 98 or so, but also because my mom and dad moved to Aspen in about 78. I bought my dad's business at the end of 1978 and was in business until 1991, both the computer business, the hide business, and a couple of other businesses. And my mom and dad were both deeply involved in the ranch from the late 70s or so. And I'd been to the ranch many times starting around 1976 and loved it here and took workshops here and taught here and was a visiting artist here. And this is a great place that I love, and I bet you all do too. Really life-changing. So I'm going to tear up while I'm thinking about. The Fisherman and His Wife was a woodblock print I made in the first workshop that I took at Anderson Ranch, woodblock printmaking with Hiroki Morinoe. If you have a chance to take a workshop with Hiroki, he's such a gentle, wonderful human being and great printmaker and wonderful artist, like third-generation Japanese guy in Hawaii who learned Japanese printmaking in, I think in Kyoto, I don't know, April probably. April Vollmer is one of the students in my Mokuhanga workshop, outside Tokyo. Mokuhanga from machine-carved blocks, but all these blocks are hand-carved, and I went home after the first day. We're supposed to bring back a design, and I sketched this, thinking about, well, it's called The Fisherman and His Wife, thinking about my ex-wife and problems in my marriage and living in New York and stuff. A kind of print I really like is called Aizurie. I is blue, and Zuri is print, and A is picture. So blue printed pictures, these were popular 18, 20, 30, 40 in Japan, very popular, usually with a little bit of red showing in these shades of blue. And I started making blue printed pictures after my workshop with Hiroki. Visited Japan with my mom and dad and my sister in 2002. And I took prints with me to show a friend in Tokyo who was a printmaker, and had them with me in Kyoto. And while I was kind of shopping for Japanese prints, went in this, like the gallery in Kyoto to buy antique prints. And the owner said, well, what do you do? As he had this great show upstairs of masterpieces of late 1700s, early 1800s. Japanese woodblock prints, stuff, museum pieces that his clients lent him, nothing for sale, just an exhibition. And he had regular shows of Japanese artists' work up there in his show. He's getting ready to retire now. So I had that 2002 Mother and Child with me, a woodblock print from a gazillion blocks. And he said, well, I don't know what that is, but it's not a woodblock print. I told him I made mokuhanga. He said, no, mokuhanga means Japanese woodblock print, and that is not a woodblock print. I said, well, I have prints with me. I'll bring them in tomorrow. So he bought that and another print, and he offered me a show. And he said, we'll need about this many images. I like this color. Do more like that. And I started making prints for this show that was coming up in the fall of 2004, like a maniac. I told one of my students I made more than 60,000 prints in 18 months, 60,000 impressions with a Japanese woodblock print, like more than 60,000 in these editions of woodblock prints. So hand carving blocks, these are mostly reduction prints, like this is the block for the print on the left of Jessica, still friend, and this is like the fourth or fifth of 24 reductions of that block to make those prints. By the end of 2003, I was having physical problems, both from formalin that I used to kind of extend the open period of the damp Japanese paper print, and also from carving and carving and carving, and I wanted to work larger, and I thought, well, I could use a CNC machine to carve blocks, and I could carve blocks while I printed, which turned out to be right. And there's the machine, and there's the first set of blocks were these small 10 by 15 inch images of my son, not a reduction print. This was, I designed the blocks so that no part of the paper was printed more than 3 times, so the paper doesn't become oversaturated and I could print really fast. And while the next set of blocks was carving, which were, on the left is a print from hand-carved blocks from early 2004, and on the top is a print from machine-carved blocks from middle of 2004, and details of both. And you really cannot tell that block designs are my designs, and the paper cannot tell what kind of thing removed the part that doesn't print. So could be fingernails or a hammer or a machine or traditional carving tools. And I built this cool printing table. The one thing to say about it, it's cut on the CNC machine. It's got a little vacuum hold down for the block, which is that gridded area, and this acrylic box attached to it has 2 drawers. One, the top one, is the take-up drawer for prints I just made, and the bottom drawer is foot operated. You can kind of see a diagonal bar there, so I could press down on that table, and the bottom drawer, both of these are humidors, so they keep the paper damp. It delivers the paper right over the edge of the block, and I could pull the print out over the edge of the drawer, register it, and then release my foot, and the drawer would slide closed by a weight you see hanging there on the back, kind of a Rube Goldberg-y thing that I've printed on forever. Great, by the way. I thought this invention of this paper delivery would catch on, which, as far as I know, I'm the only one still using it. But it allows you to print really large, floppy, wet papers all by yourself. And I'm all by myself in my studio. Or here I was teaching a workshop in Connecticut in woodblock printing, so I'd teach the workshop during the day and then I'd print most of the night, getting ready for the show. I mean, this is like 30 inches high, 31 inches high, this print of Anthony, and here I am, second blocks I carved on my machine, exhausted after the machine did all this carving for me in like one day of bang, out came these huge blocks, and prints started coming out. I'm going to go, I love that print on the right of my friend Rod and his girlfriend of 1 week at this time, and then she left and took all his stuff with him a week later. He's a karate buddy, and he worked as a manager in a I don't know what you call it. I called it a strip club, but it's really like dancing girls. She was a dancing girl, and he was head over heels in love with this girl and called to say, can I have a date at your studio? So they came down and modeled, and it was a kick. But he was so unhappy a week later. This is the opening of the show in Kyoto. This is a big deal. It was my first solo exhibition. Up on top is the reception, but the most important part about it is that after the show, Linda and I, and my mom and dad were on that trip too, which was a kick. Went to visit Iwano Ichibei, the living national treasure of papermaking in Japan. And I went there to ask Iwano through an interpreter, a volunteer interpreter from nearby, who it was hard for me to get a word in edgewise because the interpreter is so enamored of Iwano-san, who's on Japanese TV all the time because he's so famous and special, and all he wanted to do was meet him and talk to him. And I'm trying to get questions in, and anyway, I have a great story, but it's too long to tell. Iwano agreed to make paper, this big paper I've been printing on, and my family made me cut out the photos of him making the paper, sorry, but I can show them to you later if you want. After this big project working towards this exhibition, I was kind of relieved, and I had been thinking about all the other things that I could do with the CNC machine. First of all, it's programmable. It can check values. You can make decisions. You can do loops with it, with the internal code of the machine. And I glued a watercolor brush inside a ketchup bottle and put some sumi ink in it, and programmed the brush to go deeper or shallower in kind of mapping the movement of the brush to a reference image of Jessica. That's a detail of this maybe 30-some inch high sheet of paper that I did a bunch of test paintings on. Then I built a gizmo, the first of a bunch of gizmos. The current ones are pretty simple and sophisticated and work much better, and made this first pen and ink drawing by layering up squiggles using the machine. mezzotint, roughing up a copper plate with a dry point needle and a roulette, and then burnishing it out for about 5 weeks, 24/7 with a small ball end burnisher. Ridiculous stuff like this with this machine just going and going and me checking, and finally the plate is case hardened, but it still made nice deep mezzotints. The same idea as the paintbrush pushing a V-shaped bit deeper or shallower, and spiraling literally in a true spiral out from one of the cat's eyes. I made 2 blocks, one spiraled from one eye, one spiraled from the other. And then I wanted to work bigger, and the paper from Iwano-san was coming, that big 77-inch wide paper. And I cut some parts for this press. Here's the press going together in my studio. And here's a big block. Early on, I tried to reduction carve blocks as I'd done by hand. But these blocks are too big, and the paper only stays unspoiled for 4 or 5 days. And this was a 12-state reduction. So I'd print, then I'd register the block back on the table and carve some of it a little bit, like the white spots, and then pull it off and print again. Here's a big print that is in our one of them is in our living room. One of them, this is the only woodcut of mine that's in a museum collection that I know of, which was a huge thrill. And it's on that big paper. And you can see paper delivery on back in the upper left, the block on my stationary bed pinch roller press, and the print in the take-up drawer. There's a big print of Sarah, one of my karate students, who was, at that time, she was a PhD candidate in reproductive biology, so it's kind of a kick to have that she likes to model naked. And it's best to find models who are sort of exhibitionists. Here is, I wanted to show you inking on the press. This is a kind of a medium-sized block, but here you can see my paper delivery drawer, which is driven by a $99 garage door opener, and finding the paper, registering it in traditional Kento kind of, and a center line like making a silk screen, laying the paper out, printing, pulling the paper off, putting it in the take-up drawer. Like a Rube Goldberg gizmo, right? Oh, sorry, got to figure out how to use my machine here. Let me try this. There we go. This is a pen later. This is 8 years after I started, and the gizmo's a little different. There's like this frictionless pen guide at the bottom. But this is making a pen and ink drawing. And there's the first life-size pen and ink drawing of Sarah Oliver, sort of a muse and regular model. And I'm a godfather to her daughter. Linda and I are godparents. And you can see this crazy cross-hatching, sort of scientific squiggly cross-hatching, that another big drawing. This is 76 inches high, 45 inches wide, and a detail. Another one of London, a good friend of my son's from high school. Then airbrush. Oh, could I paint with an airbrush? Maybe I could paint with an airbrush, making all these parts. Solenoid that I could operate under computer control in my program to turn it on and off, and then painting with airbrush, another airbrush painting. This one used 7 primitives, kind of, a small, medium, and large diamond, a small, medium, and large square, and an X, and then I calculated the amount of the paper that each one would cover and piled them up to make equal steps, 28 different values, and then painted like a litho, red, yellow, blue, black. And another gizmo, this one is 43 inches high. These take a long time, like those big drawings are maybe 4 weeks of drawing all day and night. And so the machine's kind of tied up. Another kind of gizmo, painting with acrylic paint from a Coke bottle, gravity fed to a, it's kind of like an airbrush without air, like a needle valve painter. Portraits of my mother and father. Jessica came to the studio with her entire wardrobe, I think, and we spent the most wonderful day photographing her in this almost a Kouros posture, and for this commission from the Beach Museum, which is K-State's art museum. And I was starting to think of my drawings and paintings as prints, and I made this gigantic 5-foot by 12-foot sheet of paper with a whole bunch of identical drawings on it, and then tore them up. And the Beach Museum sold it to its members and gave me an exhibition. So I had a solo exhibition at a museum. That was a first. A detail of the first kind of chiaroscuro attempt at drawing. This is black ink and white ink on paper painted pink, 25 inches high. And you can get an idea of squiggling red, yellow, blue, black, and white paint. A bigger one of Hal Wirt. What my work actually looks like. It's like that programming is the lower left, and my program that I wrote, which is lower right also. Lower right is a subroutine that draws a quotation mark in any size I want, in any location I want, on as long as it's on the bed of my machine. So anywhere in 5 by 12 feet, I can draw any character, written character, any size, using subroutines like that. Upper right is a sample of the output of my program, which is the code that actually drives the machine. And I eventually, wrote a fancy program that reads its machine output in order to draw, basically to print out the program that's moving the pen while the pen is moving and making this image. So this big drawing is called the code that moves the pen, makes the image. I wrote the code, the image is mine. And here is a detail, and you can see like M2 Comet 24.580 in X. I can't read it all, but it's just the code that is moving the pen a few hundredths of an inch or a few thousandths of an inch to draw these characters, and my code cleverly piles them up in such a way that makes an image. And that wound up collected by the Nelson Atkins Museum, which is a huge kick for me. And here we are at the opening of a show that has my drawing in it. And my mom and dad donated, this was kind of after my mom's death, donated they collected Native American artifacts. And that bag on the right was a gift of my mom and dad. This was a show of important important objects the museum collected over the last 10 years. So that was neat. This big drawing of St. John Strom, what a happy person and wild girl who's like making film now in New York City. But she was just graduated from the Art Institute and modeled. And you can see black and white ink that don't touch. So the white ink and the black ink are discrete, not cross-etching. And I started thinking, well, I want to do this faster. Instead of spending a month piling up layers and layers to make one piece, which may or might not be pleasing to me. Linda says I have to hurry up. I started programming spirals. I'm sorry to take so long. This is a screenshot of the program and parameters. How big is the spiral? How fat is the width of the pen or paintbrush I'm using? Do the tiles overlap or not? And I started making drawings that I didn't like much, like these. On the top you can see yellow and blue, and then red is halfway done, and so on. And then a close-up of spiralies. They looked like inkjet prints. I started varying the size of the spirals. I put paint pens into my machine with another gizmo and changed my code so it pumped every 30 or 40 inches, whatever I told it. And painting, trying to experiment with different painting. These are all self-portraits. This one uses a rectangular shaped instead of a square shaped rectangle. The canvases are painted gray, then painted in acrylics in color on top. They're 3 by 3 feet each, and they're variations, all same reference image. Here is a video of painting on my machine, and you can sort of see in a cool way looking down through my gizmo. Oh, and we can hear it even. That's sweet. Flying across the surface of the painting. After I finish painting, you're going to see it pump in a second. There it is. Recharging its paint and moving on. And then after painting, I stretched it, and there's the finished image. It's a portrait of a young woman, Elena Sherman, and I love the tiles of it, big tiles, the cut-up tiles. I like that. How does an image made totally of horizontal and vertical lines strictly, that's all, only horizontal and vertical lines, make all these wild diagonals? And last year in January, my laser cutter arrived and I started cutting blocks, and I cut them in, instead of thinking positive, I sort of thought, wow, if I think in reverse and cut away the spiral parts, I can make like a really luminous image. And on my computer screens in my mock-ups, it was super luminous, but in reality, they're less vivid, although they're still pretty vivid. These are all woodblock prints. A portrait of my dad, my wife, my mom on the 10th anniversary of her death, my wife again, a frequent portrait of a young woman who was a studio assistant for some time, Madeline Cass. I really like that image. There's one of these in the print studio and some big prints. Again, started going big. So this is a 4x8 sheet of plywood being carved. Squint? I think they're far enough away they can see her in there, can't you? Can you see like part of a woman's face in there? Okay. The thing that I think is cool about it is through this very iterative process by accident, these little marks and big marks just grow out kind of all by themselves from cutting away spirals, or spirals that are not actually spiral shaped. I'm modifying the vectors. This is 42 by 77 inches done this year, and it's hanging in the print shop in the big downstairs, so you can see that. And okay, we're nearing the end, I promise. This is second big print this year. I've done a gazillion little prints. And I'm inking up the block in yellow, which is more opaque, changing the block, putting the paper back in the paper delivery drawer, inking the block up in black now on top of the yellow, and printing. This was an edition of 6, I think. I'm only showing you a couple of printings so as not to put you completely to sleep. Sucking the block down, I don't know if you could see it, sucks down on the vacuum. Printing it up in red. After each run is complete, I throw the paper back up into the wide open paper delivery drawer. And so these are kind of big undertakings. It takes weeks for me to carve the blocks, but I think I complete these editions in like 4 hours, 4.5 hours, something like that. So printing at top speed, I don't even look like I'm sweating too much, although I am. And so then slowing it down in a moment of kindness so you can see this big wet piece of Japanese paper that's floppy like wet paper towel coming out of my drawer with these cool diamond-shaped spirals that magically make an image of Kit. Okay, so we've been working 2 days in this workshop called Mokuhanga from Machine Carved Blocks, Japanese Woodblock Prints. First time I've tried to teach machine carved blocks, and thank God for Emil and Lisa and Thomas who are working the Fab Lab, and for Andrew who is assisting or teaching, co-teaching, and April who's also in the class who's also kind of co-teaching. And so thank you, everybody. So this is yesterday, as students are developing their iPhone photos or their designs and trying to turn them into color-separated blocks for woodblock prints. I made a mistake yesterday because I thought a few of the students would be interested in converting a photo to woodblock prints, and so I did a demo in this room on the computer showing how to make a woodblock print-like thing from photos and separate it and make these blocks. And I think almost every student then kind of followed that practice to the letter to make these, but they don't look like my prints, they look like theirs. And so here's a block that will print white on paper that he'll paint black in advance. What a cool designy image, I thought. It's a finished print. After one day to design blocks and then the next day you have finished prints, it just like knocks me out. I can't believe it. They're kind of cool. Another finished print. I think it's finished. And they'll start another one. Detail of cool design having nothing to do with my demo that is just awesome. This portrait with, you know, a psychedelic carving around the outside of the blocks. Those are the blocks for those prints. What about, whoa, baby. I mean, I'm really tickled with these images that are coming out from students, and thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry if I took too long.
All right, we have time for a couple of questions. So I'm going to invite Mike and Kristy up to the front. You guys will share that one. I'll pass this to people who are asking the question. So does anyone have any questions?
Does anyone have any sunglasses?
I do, actually. I
Here.
have 2 pairs, so.
Oh, I have a question.
No, seriously, I'm joking.
Shell, 1980 reflective, but it's up to you.
Thank you.
Here. Get it, Mike. Here, if you could.
Thank you.
On one of the pieces of paper, there was a red stamp on the bottom of the paper. Was that the paper manufacturer's stamp, or was that your name in Japanese stamped on the
kind of. It says, Rai, in old-fashioned characters, it's a seal. It was carved in Japan, not by me, on a piece of stone. And it's a seal, and it says in Japanese, Rai on mokuhanga. So mokuhanga, as we know, is Japanese woodblock prints. And Rai on are characters I chose, are Japanese kanji that I chose, that mean sound of thunder. But sounds like a Japanese pronunciation of my name, Lyon, Michael Ryan. Okay. And I stamp prints with it. Oh, okay, you don't have to take it.
Oh, I was kind of wondering, those
Here.
huge prints. You said, oh, they print, those huge prints, you said, oh, they print really quickly.
No, I just said it takes about 4 hours to print.
That's quick for a big print like that. How big are the editions?
6. Those are, there are 3 of those big editions I've finished this year. I only showed 2 of them because one of them is vertical and it doesn't look good on a screen like this, but the horizontal ones do. So
So there are editions of 6 with how many colors?
4.
4.
And they're just printed once. There's no, it's not going back. The registration is really tight, but it's also risky because it's such a big sheet of paper. So
Oh,
if I went back to reprint, like if I thought, like the first print, I thought the red was kind of weak, and I sort of would like it to be redder rather than pink. But if I went back to reprint the red, then I run a huge risk of being out of register in a very noticeable way. So I think over the years of making stuff, and really I'm much more interested in, as probably we all are, in making stuff than in the stuff we make. And usually I'm disappointed in the stuff I make until, you know, how many months later when I go, oh, that was actually pretty good. Thanks for the tip to say, oh, I'm actually pretty good at that, Freddie.
So, so 6 is a good number. It's manageable and you have enough.
The paper, I only have a few sheets left. So I'm like, I don't want to make a big edition. It's not like these things are walking out of my, because my gallerist, before she went out of business in Kansas City, sold one of the early woodcuts for 15 grand. I was like, I can't insult whoever the person was who
Oh, so
bought
you
my
have to
print.
maintain your price.
So I'm stuck. So who's going to pay $15,000 for a piece of paper with ink on it? Well, maybe sometime after I die. Linda will be a good salesman and will sell my.
This is for Kristy.
Oh, you're kind.
So, no, because I was thinking about this. I didn't want to stop you, but your early work, you had almost every piece had some kind of string in it, like circle with a string going somewhere, or something like coming out from one point and going out a few ways. And then there wasn't for a while, and then it seemed like you brought it back, either those lines or little dotted lines. So what was your thought with all of that?
I guess that's here we go. I guess that's a way of, I kind of think, it was so fun to see your work, that as artists, especially if we have a history, of some time that we've been making art, that we create like a web, a complex web of threads that go in many directions. So I don't know, I think that's maybe just a little bit of a tie to that. Probably another thing is, I often think of how the materials say something about the ideas that I'm working with. So beeswax that's an encaustic, when it's cool, it's a solid. When you heat it, it becomes a liquid, and it moves. So what are the things that move us intellectually, spiritually, or emotionally? And I guess those little threads are like little trails of that are kind of ephemeral, but then sometimes they might point out something significant. So it goes in a couple different directions, I think. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Sort of.
Yeah, I think so. I was just, it seemed like some of them really made sense, and then some of them, I was wondering, why would you put it there? Because it didn't seem like it was holding anything, but it was just kind of there. Yeah. Well, that was really holding it, but there were some that just kind of went. Yeah.
And then the string that was kind of.
Yeah, that kind of coiled. Yeah. Anyway, it was very cool, Kristy.
Oh, well, thank you. It's probably a little bit of a remnant of a studio device. Like a lot of the draperies are hung by thread. So that's sort of using the thread that was part of the process of making it. But probably it has more specific meaning, like the ones that are more recent, the stitching adds a feeling of nostalgia that I'm after, that sort of subverts the kind of weird, quirky narratives. So, yeah.
Kristy, I have a question for you. Could you talk more about the historical references you use? Do those come first, or how do you decide on the imagery that you end up using?
Oh, yeah, that's, it goes a lot farther back than the things that I showed you. And I guess I'm sort of a traditional artist, but I've done a lot of ceramic sculpture and all different kinds of things that I didn't show, because it would be, I'd probably, talk for a long time. But, so what was your question again?
Just about the historical images, or where you're
yeah,
getting
yeah.
the imagery.
I'm really playing a game of appropriation in the more recent things, the holidays unfolding and through the veil. And I wanted to open it up and play a game. So it's kind of in conversation with other artists. And I include outsider art. There's one painting that references Henry Dargers. He's an outsider, lives in Chicago. And they're all from, almost all cultures. So it's a kind of exploring spiritual conundrums, probably social dilemmas, a variety of things like that. And in the spirit of play. As a teacher, we'll often tell our students, make a sketchbook and draw pictures, and I don't do that. I think in titles and words. So it'll all just be rolling around in my head. I don't know if this is be helpful or part of your question, but it'll just be rolling around in my head, and then I think of a title to frame it, and then that title will then bring imagery. And if I can pin those things down. Sometimes I actually see it, and then I just make it. Or other times I have a little more vague idea, and then I just get on the internet and I think, oh, do I want this? Do I want that? And I pull things off and then respond to them. So it's maybe more intuitive. So it's a kind of form of collage, that game of appropriation. So, yeah. Hope that answered it.
Any other questions? All right, thank you both so much for sharing.
Thank you.
And,